You can't keep doing this to yourself, Melissa. When was the last time you actually went home before midnight? Dr. Patricia Wells asked me as I finally stripped off my scrubs after another grueling shift at Nashville General Hospital. My name is Melissa Howard, and at 41 years old, I've been a trauma nurse for nearly 2 decades. The exhaustion in my bones felt heavier than usual that Thursday evening, but I forced a smile. Someone has to cover the extra shifts. We're understaffed, and these patients need us. Patricia shook her head with concern. Your dedication is admirable, but you're burning yourself out. Even superheroes need rest. I glanced at my watch. It was already past 11 p.m., marking the end of a 16-hour shift that had started before dawn. My feet ached, my back screamed for relief, and all I wanted was to collapse into my husband's arms. Tyler understands. He knows this job comes with sacrifices. What I didn't tell Patricia was that lately, Tyler had been distant, cold even. When I'd try to share stories about particularly challenging cases, he'd barely look up from his phone. When I'd suggest date nights to reconnect, he'd claim he was too tired from his work at Northrise Apparel, the clothing company where he managed their logistics department. But I attributed it to stress. After 12 years of marriage, we'd weathered difficult periods before. Just promise me you'll take some time off soon, Patricia said, gathering her things. You're one of our best nurses, but you're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. I nodded, though deep down I knew I wouldn't slow down. This hospital, these patients, this work, it was my calling. I'd built my reputation on being the nurse who never said no, who stayed late when others went home, who took on the most challenging cases without complaint. My colleagues respected me, my supervisors trusted me, and the patients' families knew they could count on me during their darkest hours. As I walked through the parking garage toward my car, something felt off. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was just the weight of exhaustion making everything seem more ominous than usual. The fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows between the concrete pillars, and my footsteps echoed louder than normal. I shook off the feeling and focused on getting home. The drive through Nashville's quiet streets should have been peaceful, but anxiety gnawed at me. Tyler hadn't returned my texts from earlier in the day, which wasn't entirely unusual given how busy we both were. But something about his recent behavior worried me. We used to be partners in everything, sharing our daily struggles and victories. Now, conversations felt forced, and the comfortable silences had become uncomfortable distances. I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for a moment, steeling myself for another evening of polite but hollow interactions. The house was dark except for a single light upstairs in our bedroom. At least Tyler had waited up for me. Growing up as the daughter of 2 factory workers in a small Tennessee town, I'd learned early that hard work and dedication were the keys to building a better life. My parents, Robert and Martha Howard, had sacrificed everything to send me to nursing school. They'd worked double shifts and gone without luxuries so I could pursue my dream of helping people in their most vulnerable moments. I met Tyler 13 years ago at a community fundraiser for the local children's hospital. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to understand my passion for nursing. He'd grown up in a middle-class family where his father owned a small construction business, and his mother taught elementary school. We bonded over our shared values of hard work and family, and he seemed genuinely proud of my career achievements. During our courtship and early marriage, Tyler had been my biggest supporter. He'd bring me coffee during my night shifts, listen patiently to my work stories, and encourage me when I decided to pursue additional certifications in trauma care. He celebrated my promotions and never complained about the long hours or the emotional toll my job sometimes took. But somewhere in the past year, things had shifted. Tyler became critical of my schedule, suggesting I was married to the hospital more than to him. He'd make passive-aggressive comments about other wives who were more available to their husbands. When I'd try to discuss it, he'd brush off my concerns or change the subject entirely. I'd started to notice other changes too. Tyler had become more secretive about his phone, taking calls in other rooms and keeping his screen turned away when texting. He'd started working late more frequently, claiming his supervisor at Northrise Apparel was demanding longer hours from the entire logistics team. New clothes appeared in his wardrobe, expensive shirts and cologne that seemed beyond what his salary should afford. My best friend since nursing school, Janet Morrison, had tried to reassure me during our occasional coffee dates. "Marriage has its seasons," she'd say with her usual gentle wisdom. "You two have been through harder times and come out stronger." Janet worked as a nurse practitioner at a private clinic downtown, and she'd often joke that she lived vicariously through my exciting emergency room stories while she dealt with routine checkups and minor ailments. Janet had been my maid of honor at our wedding, and she'd become like a sister to me over the years. She was single, having never found the right person to settle down with, but she always said she was happy focusing on her career and her close friendships. Tyler had always gotten along well with Janet, often joking that he was lucky to have married someone with such a sane and sensible best friend. Recently, though, I'd noticed that Janet seemed different when Tyler was around. She'd become quieter, more reserved, and she'd started declining dinner invitations when I mentioned Tyler would be joining us. When I asked her about it, she'd claim she was just busy with work and didn't want to impose on our couple time. Looking back now, there were so many signs I'd chosen to ignore, so many red flags I'd explained away, because I trusted the people I loved most. The breaking point came 3 weeks before that fateful Thursday night. I'd been working a particularly challenging shift when we received a teenage car accident victim. The girl, barely 17, had suffered massive internal bleeding, and despite our best efforts, we couldn't save her. Her parents' grief was devastating to witness, and I'd stayed late to comfort them and help with arrangements. When I finally got home around midnight, I found Tyler in the living room with his laptop closed beside him and a guilty expression on his face. "You're late again," he said, not bothering to ask about my day or acknowledge the emotional weight I was carrying. "We lost a patient," I said quietly, hoping for some understanding, some comfort from the man who was supposed to be my partner in life. Tyler barely looked up from his phone. "You can't save everyone, Melissa. Maybe if you didn't get so emotionally involved, these things wouldn't affect you so much." His callousness hit me like a physical blow. "This is my job, Tyler. This is who I am. I thought you understood that." "What I understand is that you care more about strangers than your own husband," he snapped back. "When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about your work? When's the last time you made time for us?" The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it, but his timing was cruel. "I'm doing my best to balance everything," I said, fighting back tears. "I thought we were a team. Teams require both players to show up," Tyler said coldly before walking upstairs, leaving me alone with my grief and confusion. That night I'd called Janet, desperate for someone to listen and understand. She'd been strangely quiet during our conversation, offering minimal comfort and ending the call quickly, claiming she had an early morning. It was the first time in our friendship that she hadn't been there when I needed her most. In the days that followed, Tyler's behavior became even more erratic. He'd disappear for hours without explanation, claiming he was running errands or meeting friends I'd never heard of. When I'd suggest marriage counseling, he'd dismiss the idea, saying I was overreacting and that our problems would resolve themselves once I learned to prioritize better. I threw myself even deeper into work, taking on extra shifts and volunteering for the most challenging cases. If Tyler thought I cared too much about my patients, then I'd prove him right. At least at the hospital, my dedication was appreciated and my efforts made a difference. The patients and their families needed me, even if my husband apparently didn't. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days healing others, while my own life was quietly falling apart. But I was a fighter. I'd overcome poverty, put myself through school, and built a respected career in one of the most demanding fields in healthcare. Whatever was happening in my marriage, I would find a way to fix it, just like I fixed everything else. I had no idea that some things, once broken, could never be repaired. That Thursday shift had been particularly brutal. We'd received multiple trauma cases from a multi-car accident on Interstate 40, and I'd spent hours in surgery assisting Dr. Wells with the most critical patients. By the time my shift officially ended at 7 p.m., I was physically and emotionally drained, but I stayed another 4 hours to ensure all our patients were stable and comfortable. The drive home felt longer than usual. My hands ached from the constant pressure of compressions and sutures, and my feet throbbed in my worn nursing shoes. All I wanted was to sink into a hot bath and fall asleep in Tyler's arms, even if our relationship had been strained lately. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe we could finally talk through our problems and find our way back to each other. As I turned onto our street, I noticed Janet's distinctive red Honda Accord parked 2 blocks away from our house. It struck me as odd. If she was visiting, why hadn't she parked in our driveway as usual? I shook off the thought, attributing it to my exhaustion playing tricks on me. Janet often worked late at the clinic, so maybe she was just visiting another friend in the neighborhood. I pulled into our driveway and sat in my car for a moment, gathering the energy to face whatever mood Tyler might be in. The house was mostly dark, except for the soft glow coming from our bedroom window upstairs. A small part of me hoped he'd waited up for me, maybe even prepared something special to help mend the growing rift between us. My key turned silently in the lock, and I stepped into the foyer, setting my purse and keys on the small table by the door. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of voices coming from upstairs. My heart lifted slightly. Maybe Tyler was on a work call and would be free to talk once he finished. I climbed the stairs slowly, my feet heavy with exhaustion. The voices became clearer as I approached our bedroom, and I realized there were 2 distinct tones. Tyler was talking to someone, but the conversation sounded intimate rather than professional. The second voice was softer, distinctly feminine, and hauntingly familiar. I paused outside our bedroom door, my hand frozen on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to burst in immediately, but something held me back. Maybe it was denial, or maybe it was the last vestige of trust I still held for the 2 people I loved most in the world. I pressed my ear to the door, hoping to hear something that would explain away my growing suspicions. "She'll be working late again," I heard Tyler say. "She always does on Thursdays. We have at least 3 more hours." "I feel terrible about this," came the reply, and my blood turned to ice as I recognized Janet's voice. "She's my best friend, Tyler. She doesn't deserve this." "You said yourself that she's never home anymore," Tyler responded. "When's the last time she really paid attention to either of us? You've been there for me more in the past 6 months than she has in the past 2 years. My legs began to shake as the reality of what I was hearing sank in. The 2 people I trusted most in the world were betraying me in the most intimate way possible. My mind raced through all the signs I'd missed, all the times Janet had been unavailable when I needed her, all the excuses Tyler had made for his strange behavior. I know, but still. Janet's voice was cut off by what sounded like movement on the bed. "Don't think about her right now," Tyler said, his voice taking on a tone I'd once thought was reserved only for me. "Think about us. Think about how good this feels." I couldn't listen anymore. My hand trembled as I slowly turned the doorknob, preparing myself for a sight that would forever change everything I thought I knew about my life. The door opened silently, and the scene before me was worse than anything my imagination could have conjured. There, in the bed Tyler and I had shared for 12 years, were the 2 people I'd trusted most in the world. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice me standing in the doorway, my mouth open in silent shock. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from collapsing completely. The room spun around me as 12 years of marriage and 20 years of friendship crumbled in an instant. Everything made sense now. Tyler's distant behavior, Janet's awkwardness around me, the unexplained absences, the secretive phone calls. But instead of screaming or confronting them immediately, something cold and calculating took over. Maybe it was the years of training to remain calm under pressure. Or maybe it was pure survival instinct. But I found myself reaching for my phone instead of my voice. I raised the camera and began recording, capturing several minutes of their betrayal in crystal clear detail. Tyler's face was clearly visible, as was Janet's distinctive butterfly tattoo on her shoulder blade. There could be no denying what was happening, no explaining it away as a misunderstanding. As I recorded, my mind began working with surgical precision. I thought about our joint bank accounts, our shared assets, the house that was in both our names, but that I'd paid most of the mortgage on with my higher salary. I thought about the expensive gifts Tyler had been buying lately, and realized he'd probably been using our money to woo my best friend. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 minutes, I quietly backed away from the door and retreated downstairs. My hands were surprisingly steady as I forwarded the video to my personal email account and then deleted it from my phone. I wanted to ensure I had evidence, but I also wanted to be smart about how I used it. I sat in my car in the driveway and called my sister Rebecca, who lived in Memphis and worked as a family law attorney. It was nearly midnight, but I knew she'd answer if I called twice in a row. Our family emergency signal. "Melissa? What's wrong?" Rebecca's voice was immediately alert despite the late hour. "I need a divorce lawyer," I said quietly, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "The best one you know." "Oh, honey, what happened?" Rebecca's voice was filled with concern and anger. "I'll explain everything later. Right now, I need to know if I have video evidence of adultery, and if most of our assets are in my name or paid for with my income. What are my options?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, processing what I was telling her. "With solid evidence of infidelity, and if you can prove primary ownership of assets, you could potentially keep most of everything in the divorce." "But Melissa, are you sure about this? Is there any chance?" "There's no chance," I interrupted. "It's over. I just need to be smart about how I handle it." "Okay, I'm going to give you the name of the best divorce attorney in Nashville. Her name is Victoria Sterling, and she specializes in high-asset divorces. Don't do anything else tonight except document everything you can think of. Don't confront them. Don't move any money. Just gather information." "What about work? Should I tell anyone?" "Not yet. Act normal until we have a strategy. How vindictive do you want to be?" I thought about the years of sacrifice, the trust I'd given so freely, the way they'd made me feel like I was the problem in my marriage. "As vindictive as legally possible." "Good. Victoria will help you with that. Call her first thing in the morning." I ended the call and sat in the darkness, planning my next moves with the same methodical approach I used in medical emergencies. I spent the rest of that night in a hotel room, using the time to meticulously document everything I could remember about our finances, assets, and the timeline of Tyler's suspicious behavior. I accessed our online banking from my laptop and screenshotted months of transactions, noting the expensive dinners, hotel charges, and purchases that I now realized had been funding his affair. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, claiming food poisoning. Patricia was immediately concerned, knowing how rarely I missed shifts, but I assured her I'd be back by Monday. I needed the day to meet with Victoria Sterling and begin the process of dismantling my marriage with surgical precision. Victoria's office was in a sleek downtown building, and she herself was exactly what I'd expected: sharp, professional, and utterly ruthless when it came to protecting her clients' interests. She watched the video I'd recorded with no visible emotion, taking notes as she observed the evidence. "This is excellent documentation," she said when it finished. "With evidence this clear, we can pursue a fault-based divorce, which puts us in a very strong position. Tell me about your assets." I laid out everything. The house we'd bought 8 years ago, mostly with my down payment and consistently higher mortgage contributions. Our joint savings accounts, which were primarily funded by my salary. His car, which I'd co-signed for, and my retirement accounts, which Tennessee law would normally consider marital property. The fact that you've been the primary breadwinner and have documentation of that will work in our favor, Victoria explained. Combined with the adultery evidence, we can argue for you to retain the majority of marital assets. But I want to be strategic about this. Don't tip your hand until we're ready to file. What do you mean? Continue acting normal. Go home tonight. Have dinner with your husband. Pretend everything is fine. Meanwhile, I'll prepare the paperwork, and we'll coordinate with a forensic accountant to fully document the financial situation. When we move fast and completely. The thought of going home and pretending nothing had happened made my stomach turn, but I understood the strategy. How long will this take? If we do it right, we can have papers served within a week and temporary orders in place shortly after. The key is to maintain the element of surprise while we get everything in order. I spent the weekend playing the role of the devoted wife while secretly preparing for war. Tyler seemed more relaxed than he'd been in months, probably because he thought he was successfully deceiving me. He was even affectionate, suggesting we have dinner out and holding my hand across the table as he spun lies about his day. Janet called Saturday afternoon to check in, her voice saccharine with false concern. You sounded tired when we talked earlier this week. Everything okay? Just work stress, I replied, marveling at how easily I could match her deceptive tone. Tyler and I are actually doing really well lately. He's been so attentive and sweet. I could practically hear her discomfort through the phone. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both. We should all get together soon, I added, twisting the knife a little deeper. Maybe next weekend? You could come over for dinner. Oh, I might be busy next weekend. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. By Monday morning, Victoria had everything ready. The forensic accountant had confirmed what I already knew. I had contributed approximately 70% of our combined assets over the course of our marriage. The adultery evidence was irrefutable. And thanks to Tennessee's fault-based divorce laws, Tyler's infidelity would cost him dearly. Are you ready for this? Victoria asked as we reviewed the papers one final time. I thought about that 17-year-old girl I'd lost 3 weeks ago, about how fragile life could be, about how quickly everything could change. I've been ready since Thursday night. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Tyler kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, the same perfunctory peck on the cheek he'd been giving me for months. Have a good day at work, honey, he said, completely unaware that his comfortable life was about to implode. You too, I replied sweetly, watching from the window as he drove away in the car I'd helped him finance. At exactly 10 a.m., Victoria's process server arrived at Tyler's office at Northrise Apparel. She'd specifically chosen a time when he'd be in his weekly team meeting, ensuring maximum visibility for his humiliation. I wasn't there to witness it, but Victoria called me afterward with the details. He tried to hide the papers in his folder, but his supervisor asked what was wrong when he went pale, she reported with professional satisfaction. Apparently, the entire logistics team now knows he's being served with divorce papers citing adultery. At 10:30 a.m., a different process server arrived at the private clinic where Janet worked. I'd specifically requested that Victoria find grounds to name Janet as a co-respondent in the adultery claim, which meant she'd be publicly identified as the other woman in our divorce proceedings. But that wasn't enough. During my weekend of strategic planning, I'd made some calls to discover something interesting about Janet's employment situation. The private clinic where she worked was owned by a group of conservative investors who prided themselves on maintaining high moral standards among their staff. More importantly, Janet had signed a morality clause as part of her employment contract, something that had seemed like an antiquated formality when she'd first mentioned it to me years ago. At 11 a.m., I made a call to the clinic's administrator, Patricia Hughes, who I'd met at several medical conferences over the years. Patricia, this is Melissa Howard from Nashville General. I need to make you aware of a situation involving one of your employees that might affect the clinic's reputation. I explained the situation professionally, focusing on the documentation I had and the public nature of the divorce proceedings. I made it clear that I wasn't asking for any specific action, just ensuring they were aware before it became public knowledge. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Melissa," Patricia said gravely. "I'll need to review Janet's employment contract and discuss this with our board of directors." By noon, my phone was buzzing with frantic calls from both Tyler and Janet. I let every single one go to voicemail, following Victoria's advice to maintain silence until our strategy was complete. The first voicemail from Tyler was angry. "What the hell is this about, Melissa? You're being ridiculous. We need to talk." The second was panicked. "Please call me back. I can explain everything. This is all a misunderstanding." By the third voicemail, he was desperate. "Melissa, please. I know you're upset, but we can work this out. Don't do this to us." Janet's messages followed a similar progression from indignation to terror. "How could you do this to me?" evolved into, "Please, I'm sorry, but my job is on the line here." By Thursday, exactly 1 week after I'd discovered their betrayal, the dominoes were falling faster than either Tyler or Janet could handle. Victoria called me that morning with an update that made me smile for the first time in days. "The judge granted our request for temporary exclusive possession of the marital home," she announced. "Tyler has until 6 p.m. today to remove his personal belongings. Everything else stays with you." "What about the bank accounts?" "Frozen pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings. But since you can demonstrate that the majority of the funds came from your salary, you'll have access to what you need for living expenses. He'll get a small allowance until everything is finalized." I was working an afternoon shift at the hospital when Patricia Hughes from Janet's clinic called my personal phone. "Melissa, I wanted to let you know that we've made our decision regarding Janet Morrison. Given the morality clause in her contract and the public nature of these proceedings, we've decided to terminate her employment effective immediately." "I appreciate you letting me know," I said, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "Off the record, I also wanted to thank you for handling this so professionally. If the situation had become public without us being prepared, it could have damaged the clinic's reputation significantly." That evening, I drove past our house to see Tyler loading boxes into his brother's pickup truck. He looked haggard and defeated, a far cry from the confident man who'd been lying to my face just days earlier. Our neighbors were clearly watching from their windows, and I knew the gossip mill in our subdivision would ensure everyone knew exactly why Tyler was moving out. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Can we please talk? I lost my job. I have nowhere to go. I'm sorry." I deleted the message without responding. The house felt different when I entered it that night, lighter somehow, as if removing Tyler's presence had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. In our bedroom, I opened the windows to let in fresh air and began the process of reclaiming my space. I found a note Tyler had left on my pillow. "I know I hurt you, but destroying my life won't fix ours. Please reconsider." I crumpled it up and threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay ashes. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. True to Victoria's predictions, the combination of documented adultery and my financial contributions resulted in Tyler receiving minimal assets from our marriage. I kept the house, the majority of our savings, and my retirement accounts. Tyler was ordered to pay spousal support, a particularly bitter irony that he'd have to send me monthly checks after what he'd done. Tyler's life unraveled completely in the aftermath. Word of the divorce spread through his workplace, and his reputation at Northrise Apparel was permanently damaged. His supervisor, who valued integrity and family values, made it clear that Tyler's advancement opportunities were limited. Within 6 months, Tyler had been demoted to an entry-level position and eventually left the company altogether. He moved back in with his parents, a 43-year-old man starting over with nothing but the shame of his choices. Janet fared even worse. The nursing community in Nashville was smaller than people realized, and word of her affair with a married colleague's husband spread quickly through professional networks. Unable to find employment at any reputable medical facility in the area, she was forced to take a position at a rural clinic 2 hours outside the city, making half her previous salary and living in isolation. The friendship that had once been the cornerstone of her social life was destroyed, and she found herself completely alone, a consequence of betraying the person who had trusted her most. As I sit in my beautifully renovated home office, reviewing my investment portfolio that has grown substantially since the divorce, I feel a profound sense of peace. The revenge I'd orchestrated wasn't born of cruelty, but of justice, a careful dismantling of the lies that had nearly destroyed me. Looking back on that journey from betrayal to vindication, I realized that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well and refusing to let others' betrayals define your worth.